name is Dave Plennon, as you can see from the corner of my little rectangle. The facilitator today. And before I forget, most of the people on the call right now know that we asked for contributions at some point during our forum, and I'm the one who usually forgets to make that pitch. So I'm going to put that out there right now. And Rick has given us opportunities on the screen. I'm not exactly familiar with them. Rick, is there a place where people can go to make contributions on our screen today?
Yes, I am pulling that up right now. Yeah, as you go, you'll see it. It's a link tree, and it'll have places that you can go.
All right, that's great. So Rick, would you like to introduce McGregor, since you're familiar with her work and you've connected with her before?
Sure.
Thank you.
So some of you might remember back in August, we had Phil Gittens from World Beyond War, who is one of the people who works with all the volunteer groups that they have around the world. And it was a really good talk because it was very apparent that this group does a lot of peacemaking work and is very methodical and it works very efficiently in doing it. And part of that is probably because they have a really good combination of people that have done peace work for a while, and some newer, younger people that come on board and maybe have a different perspective because the world has changed. Um, and we thought that it would be a really good connection to be able to talk to the folks here in the California region and see how we can work together. So McGregor is one of the people that is coordinating the California region. And we're here with Dolores Howard as well, who's involved with World Beyond War. And I think part of this is going to be a presentation. And also, maybe part of it can be a little brainstorming if we can, to see how we can effectively work together on maybe some stuff that's coming up very, very soon. So, McGregor, the floor is yours. I have that slide ready and queued up.
Well, let me just thank you very much. I am so honored to be here, that you've opened your hearts and gotten up early in the morning to hear about this. I am a retired registered nurse, and it's not an accident that I was a nurse, because I feel that I have been battling death all my life, war and illness and death. And I accept natural death, but unnatural death. So I've always been against war. My first demonstration was in 1966. I was a junior in high school against Lyndon Baines Johnson in Indianapolis. But in World Beyond War, I work with people who have just gone to their first peace demonstration, and that is a powerful combination. And that is what's happening. So I would like to start my slides if I can. Is a global movement to end all wars, not one particular war. My life has been one war after another: the Vietnam War, Grenada, the invasion of Panama, all of these things. Now I'm in a group, the institution of war, not just individual wars. Next slide. Our vision. It's so amazing that Ruby just talked about vision. Californians, World Beyond War, a space for those who share a common vision. All human conflict is resolved by non-violent means. Our three prongs are education, nonviolent resistant, and media outreach. All three every time. If you do a nonviolent resistance action, the education before and after, the media outreach to amplify our message, always. Next. Media. Our California chapter just sponsored on March 18th a workshop with Norman Solomon about how to actually get through the cracks in the media, how to get your letter, how to cultivate, how to use relationships within the media to get our message out. And the reason is we have to do it. So we must be patient, and it's cultivated and have a system. And I want to compliment you, because one of the things he said is peace groups should have a built-in media posting, social media, and you have that. So you're already what he recommended. Next slide. Activism. This is the key. Nonviolent activism everywhere. My particular activism is that I go to Vandenberg, it used to be called Air Force Base, but one of our recent presidents changed it to a Space Force Base. So that's what it's called. And I go there to protest the intercontinental ballistic missile tests that occur there 4 times a year. So when I came to World Beyond War, everything that it offered helped me in my peace work that I was already doing. I chose it because it supported my work. And I want you to look to see if it can support your work. Next slide. Education. I recommend the courses, and I recommend this one, the Global Security System, an Alternative to War. It is the key thing that is different with World Beyond War. What are we offering? It's the network of world organizations, world courts, the federal movement, everything that's possible, human rights progress, treaties that have worked. We have abolished landmines. We really did do that. Things are getting, you study what's working. It will give you hope. Next slide. All you have to do to become an affiliate. I understand you're a group of communities, but if you go back to your community, if you sign the Declaration of Peace as a group and as individuals that you are against all war and all preparations for war, you're then an affiliate. My group, next slide. I'm with the Monterey Peace and Justice Center. Here's some of the things we do. We do a lot, but we have been an affiliate since 2017. I have to admit, for a while, I didn't utilize the resources, but I started during the pandemic to study the course, Leaving World War II Behind. This had a profound effect on me. Up until I took that course, I was not a pacifist. I was not against all wars. I just happened to be against every single war since World War II. And I couldn't be against World War II because I loved my dad, who fought on Iwo Jima and Saipan. But I realize now, my dad told me war was terrible, that it was just terrible. Just because he was a good guy doesn't mean it was a good war. And it changed me. It's called Leaving World War II Behind, and it's a hard course. But these courses, next slide. We were an affiliate. Chico Peace and Justice Center is an affiliate. Next. Peace Fresno. Next. This is Monterey Peace and Justice. I put my group in twice. Just, Next. Environmentalists Against War, a wonderful group. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The key to intergenerational work is the environment. The key next slide. Veterans for Peace, the Sonoma chapter, and I think other Veterans for Peace chapters might be interested. Next. United for Peace and Justice is a nationwide organization, but the co-founder, Jackie Cabasso, is here in California, and they're affiliated with World Beyond War too. So show the next slide. Code Pink, we put San Francisco because they're the most active in working with World Beyond War, but Code Pink is in California are affiliates. Next slide. A World Beyond War affiliate is an existing entity with its own name, brand, and mission, such as Peace Brigades or Code Pink. We have a common mission of war abolition and decide to work together to amplify each other's pro-peace and anti-war activities. It's next slide. In Southern California, a couple years ago, the California chapter raised money and put up billboards. And just 2 months ago, 6 billboards went up in Oakland, Berkeley, paid for by Ben Cohen, about how much money is being wasted on the military, how much money it is. And we have the references. 3% could end starvation. Next. This is the course that I think is the key one. If you dip into, you don't have to be an affiliate to take the courses. You can do the courses in the book clubs and have a good time without. But I recommend this one. This is the deep one that answers the question, well, what do we do instead? And that's a question that gets yelled. A very young woman working for Back to the Brink was passing out very mild literature at the Oppenheimer Oscars. And people harassed her. They said, what will we do instead if we don't have war? Next. We have various programs and campaigns that people can participate in or not and use the resources, such as the base closing, including one of the biggest databases on where the bases are, because it's a world organization. There's new chapters in Africa and Latin America and different countries where people report on American bases. Next. Divest from the war machine. Next. Militarized policing in your locality. The American Friends Service Committee do a great deal of work on this, and it has an impact. Next. And I'm hoping that we will get some new affiliates. So, end of slides. Thank you very much.
I'm glad that you put in the John August Swanson slide in there. That's one of my favorite paintings from him.
Well, I got it from your website. So it must be not accidental that you're. So what I want to do is far more important. I want to give you 2 examples of why a California. World Beyond War is international. Why do you even need a California? We are not trying to start another organization. We are not asking you to come to another meeting. The opposite. We want to benefit from your resources and share ours. For example, young people care deeply about the environment. We sponsor protests at night, midnight, at Vandenberg Space Force Base, which is in Santa Barbara County near Lompoc. And it's the only place where you can actually see our nuclear weapons being tested. Now, it's not the bomb going off, it's the missile that carries it, the intercontinental ballistic missile that has been our land-based horror since the late 60s. This is not new. 1959, they took Khrushchev on a train to Vandenberg to frighten him, because that time the Titan missiles were there. This is a long history of terror by the US at Vandenberg. That's where the satellites go up that do what's called over the horizon, monitor war in other parts of the world. And that's where they test. Many young Americans don't even know that we have nuclear weapons, much less that the new budget is 1.3 trillion and it's going through to expand and rebuild them all at staggering expense with no questions asked. But going to Vandenberg, you can see it. You can see the missile go up from occupied Chumash land. You can see it arch on its 4,000-mile journey over the Pacific, where it's tracked by tracking stations on the Garden Island of Hawaii, where the Hawaiian Peoples Islands are used to track this military horror. And then It arcs over the Pacific, the beautiful, beautiful blue Pacific, and it lands carrying a dummy hydrogen bomb meant to a world, lands in the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands, where the United States tested 67 atomic and hydrogen bombs, including the Bikini test in the 40s and 50s. It is a story of people. It is a story of land. It is a story of appalling waste. And when people actually go there, we try to use the train. We call it the Peace Train. It's specifically the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner 777. So if you want to come to a night launch, you get on in Los Angeles at 3 p.m. You arrive at Lompoc at 7 p.m., stay in a motel till midnight, and then we all go out, watch the launch, protest it, come home, debrief, get on the train, and you're home by noon the next day. It's a peace sleepover, good for the environment and more fun for young people than writing your congressman or collecting money. So we're trying to have some creative, environmentally based. The other thing that we're working on, and this is brand new, you were the first people to hear about it. The petition isn't even up. The United States Navy is planning to build a huge building on the coast in beautiful Monterey. It's called the Naval Innovation Center. And it's going to be a center for high-tech warfare. They say it's a good place because it's right on the Pacific and it's near Silicon Valley where they can coordinate with all this high-tech warfare. We're talking artificial intelligence that's what they say. This is not me. Go read their stuff. They say we're so proud, we'll be high-tech, we'll be cutting edge. And they put it up, get this, it's open for environmental assessment comment. But the comments are meant to be about the buildings, which are bad enough. But what about the impact on surely a huge naval thing in beautiful historic Monterey, the old capital, is the business of all of California, not just Monterey? How many people here have been to the aquarium and love it? How many young people love the aquarium? Do you know what Navy does to whales? Do you know what the Navy does to turtles? Just the maneuvers practicing for war, RIMPAC in the Pacific, those vehicles destroying fragile coral reefs, accelerating climate damage. This is intergenerational work. We just figured this out, wait for it, guys, yesterday. This Stop the Nick is a new idea. And I want to know what you think and what you think people in your area, how they would feel about a massive high-tech war center right next to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And I think it's a matter for all of us. And I think that it's my opinion. World Beyond War says education. Taking that course made me a real pacifist I never was before, without having to stop loving and honoring my dad. And I don't think I'm the only person who feels that way. Nonviolent resistance, which in my case I've been doing, but many of our people are doing it for the first time, especially stepping out for Gaza. I've spoken to 10 people who've said, I went to my first demonstration. And then the third thing is media outreach, so our word is not lost. And now I want to be open for questions. Thank you for your attention. From World Beyond War, the pledge is we oppose all war, we work for peace. That's it. Any questions?
Steve Rohde.
All right. Well, I'll exercise the privilege of the chair to thank you, McGregor. Just a wonderful, beautiful talk, and we're eager to get to know you in the time we have with you. There's a range of opinion at ICUJP on pacifism. And this might be a very good opportunity to explore that and open that topic up so we each have a better understanding of it. Could you explain your journey from seeing World War II I'll use this phrase, just war. You use any phrase that's comfortable to you. And then how you move through to the point that, if I can paraphrase, are you saying that back in those days, if you were a voter, if you were an activist, you would have opposed U.S. entry into World War II?
That is a very hard question. And now my answer is yes. But for 74, I wasn't literate, for half a century, the answer was it was the good war. It was a painful process to look at it, and I recommend it. The experience of changing an entrenched opinion of mine did me a lot of good. It really was good for me to have this massive new look at something I was sure about. So even if you don't change your mind, the experience is a good one. Looking at things like all of the things we thought it were fought for were not issues at the time. The discovery of the concentration camps came after the war, only a small handful. In fact, the United States was refusing Jews that were trying to flee. It was not to save the Jews at the time. Now, we're not saying that wasn't a valid motive. It just, the truth was, it wasn't the motive at the time. And go through the information. It was hard. It was hard to hear. And many, many other aspects of it. When I did book clubs with World Beyond War, I began to really listen to people from other countries. Many of the book clubs are taught. The last one I taught, the one where I met Dolores, was taught by a man from Ireland who was actually a soldier for peace, because Ireland had that peace force where they sent people to Bosnia and places. And it was it was a wonderful course. But you stop thinking of we as the United States, and you start to say the United States military did this, the United States government did this, and you stop saying we after you're in a lot of international meetings, and that in itself was a very good thing. But I'll go on to the next question. It's a hard thing. I can't really answer it simply. I recommend it.
Our next question comes from Carol Francis Likens.
Thank you for that. World War II, one way it could have been avoided is not supporting corporate alliances with the Nazis, where US corporations were making the Holocaust possible, building their machinery and their vehicles and their, and I really like what you said about what is there if not war? I think simply making fewer enemies. Not going around making the world hate you is a good way to avoid war. But my question is about environmentalists against war. It sounds like a group we should have speak next week in that open space, because I'd like to hear more about, you mentioned the environmental devastation of putting such a military installation next to an aquarium. But the use of water, the use of land, the use of, just how much water is used by the military, how much energy is used by the military. Could you elaborate on that and tell us how we can get a hold of it? Environmentalists for peace or environmentalists against war, whichever the group is called.
I would be delighted to facilitate any communications in any way I can help. We have to unite with the next generation. Our peace movement is too old and too white. I think that the issue of the Naval Center in Monterey would be a very good statewide issue. We only thought of it 24 hours ago. There's a petition going to go up on World Beyond War any minute. You know how that is when you're working flat out. But I would like to invite your ideas about it. What do you think of the cultural history of Monterey, the aquarium, the whales, the turtles? Young people care about turtles and whales.
Well, you mentioned Gaza. I mean, that's an environmental disaster.
Disaster, no question. An environmental disaster with replicating effects around the world, and the deepest contamination is the increase in hatred. But why don't we move to the next? Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Okay. Rick, I'm afraid I skipped over you, but it's your turn.
No worries. So, McGregor, thank you very much for the presentation. One thing that I've been finding interesting about World Beyond War is that, and I'm sure David Swanson was thinking about this when he put it together, is that you guys are using the strengths of the groups that are coming together under the umbrella and being able to basically make the interaction and the effectiveness of each of those groups much more effective. So along those lines, I do think we can probably be involved in what's going on with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We are actually also in the process of trying to put together a working action around Gaza in Los Angeles, where the vision, and this came out of retreat with our members a few months ago that want to meet more in person and do more in-person events now that COVID has at least slowed up a bit. But we're looking at doing something like having an event where people can come in, do things like scan QR codes to speak to send letters to their representatives. I think also maybe working with Investigate, which is a arm of AFSC's action. Companies are working with governments that are dropping bombs in Gaza and sending ordnance over and any sort of military support is something as well. So yes, we should very much keep in touch about some stuff. And I do think Carol Francis, maybe you and I and other people can reach out. We can probably find information on that group, the environmental group, online, and start the conversation there. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. But yeah, and then we'll make sure to keep in touch on future events as well.
Okay. McGregor, do you have anything to add or to reply? Okay. So the next person on my list at the moment is Doc Ruby Omar. So our next person to ask a question is Rebecca.
Hi, thanks. That was a great presentation. I'm really concerned. My aunt, like I said, my aunt lives in Monterey. She's lived there for 50, 60 years. And I'm not sure if she knows about this, this project. She knows everything about Monterey, I thought, but she's been going through some health challenges, so hasn't been as involved the past couple of years. I just can't imagine some type of project going. I mean, I visit there a lot. I do a lot of races there. I know her neighbors, and so I see how not just the marine life, but how it's a tourist attraction. year round, really. And, to see that, there could be some type of military threat, it'd just be a catastrophe. So anyway, I'm really interested in supporting in any way I can. I'm going to let my aunt know, but unfortunately these days, she gets most of her news from The View. So it was like,
Well, just contact me later. We're going to have an online workshop because it's open for environmental comment. And you can, if they have, get this, the military has to have an environmental assessment, and she can post a comment. I think you can post a comment. We just started looking into this. We missed it. We saw it, this environmental assessment, and so we're just assessing it as fast as we can. What I would like to do is come back next week and just give you an announcement as to what's happening.
Yes, that would be awesome too, because I'm in touch with some of her neighbors too that have been helping take care of her. So I feel like I'm part of that community, yes. And it's like a real shock to hear something like this is going on. And I have been able to get her, because I also do animal welfare, and sometimes I'm able to get her to write her senators or do things like that. So I'm sure we can get her local support, which would be very valuable for a project like this.
Also, often some of our older people in our group, they like things where they can make comments on Zoom and participate and do real things like send in an environmental. It's a way to, she can be a part of a little bit of our group.
And I'll just add too about your comments about Lompoc. I also have family from Lompoc too. My mother lived there. She migrated over from Mexico, and they lived in abandoned rail cars along the coast where they were picking beans, I think, or peas in the fields there. But it's just, scary how the military can cover up. You go into a beautiful community, Lompoc, all these beautiful flowers, these little quaint communities. My uncle had a grocery store there, and then have that presence there in amongst that beauty. And just like infiltrate these communities and do evil things. And, that happened in Lompoc. That's what happened as Vandenberg rose. And now they're trying to do that in Monterey. It's just shocking to me. And we got to stop it. Thank you. Thank you for enlightening us about what's going on. I had no idea. And I'm sure my aunt doesn't either.
I see that Steve Rohde has a hand raised again. Do you want to ask a follow-up question, Steve?
I do, but let's use our style. You have not asked a question yourself yet, so
okay.
Let's prioritize people who haven't spoken yet.
All right, thank you. So McGregor, as you know, the name of our group is Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. And our founders, including Steve Rohde, put the word justice before the word peace. And we have a motto: religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And we could enlarge that comment to go beyond religious communities and to say we must all condemn war and violence. And I want to ask Steve if that is a fair enlargement of our motto: we must all condemn war and violence.
Yes, that's well said.
Okay, so here's my question. How do you balance that desire, that wish for peace? How do you balance that with God's demand for justice, God's command to do justice, do unto others. So I'm reading from a reflection that I gave here a few weeks ago. Is peace always the number one priority? What about justice? Were the people of Vietnam and El Salvador and Nicaragua supposed to live out their miserable lives peacefully, passively, nonviolently, waiting for their oppressors to grant them justice? Is the rule in our slogan, the rule against war and violence, is that rule absolute? Justice, peace. Martin Luther King wrote from the Birmingham jail, justice too long delayed is justice denied. If we accept the broad meaning of our motto, are we then entitled to sit in judgment on others around the world? Are we entitled to sit in judgment of people like Tecumseh and Sitting Bull and Geronimo, like John Brown and the Union soldiers in the Civil War, like the African Americans who took up arms against white terrorist rule after Reconstruction failed, like Filipino natives who resisted occupation by the American military, Augusto Sandino, who rebelled using violence against the Nicaraguan oligarchy and US Marines? Am I entitled to judge? And I said that I guess what my reflection comes down to is my confession that I am not a pacifist, but I think I might still have a place in interfaith communities united for A, justice, and B, peace. So I've been an opponent of war since 1967. And most of the wars that I have opposed were wars that were initiated by my country, or to put it more accurately, the American empire. The American empire has been the greatest source of violence since World War II, just since World War II. The greatest source of violence and oppression and exploitation, probably in all of history. So I've always opposed American imperial wars, but I cannot sit in judgment upon the people of Palestine or the people of Afghanistan, the people of Central America, Latin America, Africa, South Africa. I can be a pacifist in the comfort of my home in Santa Monica, California. But I don't feel that I have any right to judge others who feel it's necessary to take up arms against an oppressive, invading, occupying force around the world, in other places around the world. So, I am not a pacifist. I don't feel that pacifism is a morally superior philosophical position. I think I would like to live in a world where oppression and exploitation and imperial violence are gone. But until that time arrives, I don't feel that I have any right to judge other people as they try to change the conditions in which they live. So I would be interested to hear your response to that issue. Thank you.
I heard what you said. I agree with every single word. We have no right to judge. We are responsible as individuals for our own actions. It is not, we don't even know what the options of the people in Gaza are facing and the sufferings. Our job is to not commit the crime. And the crime is clear. Our job is not to tell the victim how to handle it. The victim might handle it very badly. That's not the problem. We need to stop the crime. We have no right to judge. You're absolutely right. No right at all. None. And judgment, I think, is a big problem because the judgment is what is our path to oppose all wars. Gandhi addressed this. Someone said to him, isn't sometimes it right to have violence, like when the military faction went in and stopped the slaughter in Rwanda? It didn't stop till the troops arrived. That's the truth. Wasn't that a good military action? And Gandhi said, yes, sometimes it needs to be, but the price is always higher and the harvest is bad. He says, when it is resolved that way, hatred and the seeds of a future war are sown. And even so, he said, yes, but the price is too high. And I just listened to it. I agree with every word you said. It's very hard for me. So what I try to do to cope with it is to change myself inside, listen to other people, and realize that it's not we, it's this government. And as citizens in this empire, we have a heavy responsibility. So thank you for what you said. And I agree with you. It's very hard to do.
Thank you. And I agree with what you said. We must address our own use of violence. We come from a position of enormous power. And to my mind, the evil that we are opposing is the American empire, not the American people, not the American Republic, but the American empire. As I'll try to paraphrase Dr. King, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And so I don't have a right to say the Taliban must put down their arms. I can't say Hamas must put down their arms, or the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine, must they put down their arms, or the FMLN of El Salvador. So I thank you for clarifying that, because I think it is our business to examine the American empire's use of violence. So with that postscript, Steve Rohde, thank you for letting me go.
I'm actually going to defer my own question, but to say it out loud, war is bad for the environment. And I want to come back to this whole question of the environmental impact report and the Monterey military base, because I think there's an activist role we can all play in that McGregor has brought to us. But we're so on to the nub of this other question that I don't want to lose that thread, because I want to introduce this question of self-defense, which is another way of asking what is the government's responsibility to its people, and what is the people's responsibility to act in self-defense? And the hypothetical would be 9/11 with buildings and attacks in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania, and what were the alternatives that the United States had as a function of those attacks? And frankly, that was the core reason Reverend George Regas founded ICUJP, because he feared that the knee-jerk U.S. Military compulsion was to do what George Bush did. And George wanted to gather us 22 years ago to prepare for that response. And then we opposed those wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and largely have been vindicated by history that the government was lying to us, lied us into those wars, which governments have a tendency to do. I'm using my moment here on self-defense because this came up a few weeks ago, and some people are surprised to hear the following. Israel invokes a right of self-defense. The United States parrots that defense and repeats it constantly, and the news media have taken it as a given that even if they are critical of killing Palestinians, Israel had a right of self-defense. It is a false premise. The United Nations, in a proceeding on Israel's treatment of Gaza, now this is about 7 or 8 years ago, and I'll recheck the dates of this. It was found that Israel is an occupying power in Gaza. Despite its superficial withdrawal from Gaza in 2004-05, the way that Israel has treated Gaza for the last 10 years is as an occupying power. And we can talk about that in a whole set of manifestations, but it's clear, and the record is clear, and the United Nations International Court of Justice has found that to be the case. As a consequence, an occupying power not only does not have a right of self-defense against the people it is occupying, that is to inflict military extermination on them, the occupying power has a duty to protect the occupied people from any war, military action of any party, including the occupying power. So this has been turned on its head. It is not getting what I have said in the last 3 minutes. I doubt you have seen on any network. Very few press articles or spokespeople reveal this truth, which undermines so much of the moral high ground that Israel tries to seize in this war. So I'm making a point because we have some time today. And ICUJP has focused a tremendous amount of attention since October 7 and before on these issues. So what I'm reinforcing is the commentary here that even the so-called right of self-defense gives way to international law and to other circumstances on the ground. I'm interested, therefore, in McGregor's views on that. In particular, whether she went through a process, say, after the attack on Pearl Harbor. A nice poster, McGregor. Whether you've gone through a process to think about the most parallel example being the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And there's another QR code for all of us and Carol Francis's screen. U.S. attacked at Pearl Harbor. How did you work through that there were alternatives to how the U.S. should have responded to Pearl Harbor? Was there a right of self-defense in what you've read and studied? And what are your views on that?
Well, I'm actually not going to get into it because I want to listen to more of what you say. I recommend taking the course. It's very deep and very complicated. But I do want to say one thing about Pearl Harbor. On that attack, Wake Island and the Philippines were also attacked. And when the speech was first written the night before about the Day of Infamy, FDR crossed out the Philippines. They were American subjects. It was American territory at the time, and thousands died. And that went on to be a vicious Japanese occupation in which the United States did not allow the Philippines to surrender, which would have stopped the slaughter. And the general said, sometimes people just have to die. So even Pearl Harbor, what you just said, is a huge lie that leaves out all of the non-white people that died in the Philippines and continued to die. They were American subjects. When you hear Americans didn't die, they were just like Puerto Rico. There's a huge occupied land out there who are discounted. They are Americans, and they died at Pearl Harbor and continued to die. Pearl Harbor for Hawaii was just a strike. For the Philippines, it was a horrific occupation. We routinely forget that. Take the course. I recommend anyone asking these questions. You will not like it. You will feel uncomfortable. I recommend it. It will give a deeper perception of our empire. That's I recommend.
McGregor, a couple times you've mentioned the course. I gather on the World Beyond War website, one can go. Do you know? I don't know if Rick is enough in the next few minutes to find the link to that. And are you saying it literally marches through the kinds of issues we're talking about? Yes. Pearl Harbor, World War II, pacifism, etc.
It really does. I didn't like it at all. It altered some of my thinking. You won't like it. Phil Gittin spoke to you. He is runs our educational arm. The educational arm is remarkable. I am now taking a course called War and the Environment. 3 of my fellow course people are from Africa. It's a very rich discussion. And it's not accidental that I happen to notice the environmental impact effect for this naval thing fits in with this course, and it opened my eyes to see it. Because they've been planning this building for a while. It's been 2 or 3 stages. We just noticed it. Military is everywhere. There's another course called, the one I recommend most, though, is the Global Security System, because that's what we have instead. Basically, instead of nation states have got to go, and they are going. Many modern nation states were just made up in a treaty room. They're not real phenomena. So anyway, I'll shut up and hear other questions.
Well, we've seen, if with Dave's permission, we've ellipsed into that environmental question. First of all, Dolores has put in the chat the link to public comment on this naval. And don't you
Yes.
love, don't we all love how governments and the military use euphemisms, that they dress up what they do? This is the Naval Innovation Center. Who could oppose innovation? So that link is there. What I did in the last few minutes is Google "war is bad for the environment." Armed conflict leaves a long trail of environmental damage, which in turn can worsen our health and that of other species. Conflict, pollution, washed up landmines, military emissions. This is a thoroughly analyzed topic. The silent victim: how nature becomes a casualty of war. That was published in the New York Times in June of last year. And any of you can keep cataloging these. What I want to reinforce is what McGregor has brought to us. In the 60s, the Center for Constitutional Rights and others after that found that litigation is a public forum for advancing radical political ideas. That you may not win a lawsuit. You may only get a trial and then an appeal, but the entire forum of bringing the case, going to court, having hearings, forcing the other side, the government, the county, the military, to defend itself, is vitally important, and a huge community of interest has been developed in impact litigation. These cases at the outset can seem hopeless. They can seem out of sync with traditional law, but they are a powerful vehicle. And environmental impact reports and the environmental impact process has become exactly one of those forums, because you do have to go through this very arcane complaint system and comment system and hearings. And ultimately, especially in California, there is a panoply of legal remedies. After going through the administrative process, then you can go to court. You have to have standing, you have to have an environmental group or a person or a community that's impacted by the planned land use. But in all of that, and in this case, if you're arguing that not only generally speaking, war is bad for the environment, it gives you that hook to bring in all of the devastation that wars have caused across history, and more prominently today in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Sudan and elsewhere. And then more specifically, this plant, this innovative center, what is it doing locally to that environment? And you gather experts and environmental peace and justice organizations, which fortunately have developed and thrived. So I think McGregor has brought us something very important. It's in California, and ICUJP can be a partner in this, as has been suggested. You always need a lot of volunteers, and we're going to need lawyers familiar with these procedures. And I'll turn this into a question by asking Dolores, by putting the chat, the information in the chat. Were you just resourceful this morning, or have you already focused on this question or any other issues of the environment and war?
Well, I am enrolled in the environment, war in the environment, with World Beyond War, week 3 of the class, and I'm really impressed with the materials and how much I'm learning about the impact on the environment of not only war itself, but preparation for war. And so I'm thoroughly on the learning curve right now, but McGregor alerted us to this Naval Innovation Center, and the draft environmental impact statement was published a short time ago. And as the case with these kinds of things, the window is very, very short for the comments on the draft, but they're due by Monday. And I'm sure all these steps that you've outlined, Steve, about what can still happen after this are really I don't know, give me hope that, even if folks are joining at this point, there's still a lot that can happen. But that link was to an article in the Monterey County Weekly. And then from there's a link to the place where you post the comments. And it's, the draft statement, the environmental impact statement is just a monster to read. I haven't made my way through it yet. And the commenting is not easy for the general public to do. And often there are, instructions. I'm not sure if this is the case on this one, but instructions like, don't just put, basically telling us not to put an emotional comment, make sure that what we say is backed up by science. And I think that also is disheartening to folks who are learning about this and wanting, the right thing, but may not have all the facts and information. And when these statements are made, I think it could discourage folks from participating, but I think we go ahead anyway and rely on those that know more to strengthen our statements.
With deference to Rick and Rose, I'm making this an action item, and I'm very scared by the idea that Monday is the deadline. Are you yet aware of any group that intends over the weekend and on Monday to file some placeholder objections to this innovation center?
No, I am not. But in this environmental assessment, in the executive summary at the beginning, they said they did not assess the following things because it was not needed: coastal impact, hazardous waste, public health and safety, recreation, and environmental justice. These were all not assessed. So I think if we had a lawyer, this is so not the intent of this assessment, but we don't have anybody. It's basically just me and a couple other people right now because we just started.
Right.
If a lawyer would file even a thing saying this doesn't meet the minimum standards to delay it, I think it could help a lot. But
well,
I don't know.
You don't. I mentioned a lawyer because I was thinking the long-term strategy and eventually going to court. An individual or a group can file comments to a draft EIR. And I'm going to do something else right now. I'm convening a special meeting of the board of directors of ICUJP on this screen. Most of the people on this screen are board members. And I think this opposition to this military innovative project is squarely at the heart of ICUJP's mission. So I would ask for a motion from any board member to oppose this program and authorize us to take all necessary steps to do so. I see a motion from Carol Francis. I see a second from Maggie. All board members in favor of that motion say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Some behind the screen, I'm sure. Any against? Any abstentions? So we're on board with this, Dolores and McGregor. And through Rick's email, you can be in touch with us today, over the weekend. Dolores, do you know if it's literally midnight on Monday, or what is the
It's
deadline?
midnight. It's 11:59, March 25th.
Right.
And the
So-
comment area, you're allowed to attach documents. I
Right.
know that they discuss these things very seriously. They do get discussed by the people that review them.
So ICUJP cannot take the lead on this. We're not going to be the originator, but if in the next 72 hours, the two of you are able to do draft comments, then I think it will be impressive to add an interfaith group like ours to the signers of that those objections. And what I called a placeholder before, even a skeletal list, McGregor listed what's not in the environmental impact report. A skeletal set of objections will be a placeholder. And then as hearings and other procedures go forward, you'll be able to speak to that as an objector. So let's do that. And I'm going to turn it back to Dave. I myself have to go off the screen right now for a minute.
Before you go off the screen, may I say thank you to you for bringing up the concept, the idea of self-defense. That's something that we could discuss at length another time, but it's very important in discussions of war and peace to introduce the concept of self-defense. Thank you, Steve. You're dismissed. Now I see that Rick, you have your hand up again, but can I go to Rose, who has not asked a question yet? Thank you. Rose Leibowitz.
Okay, well, actually, I've kind of veered off. I had something I was going to say, but now it's actually changed a little bit. I've sent public comment to EIRs many times. Don't be frightened of it. I just want to tell you that. You don't get emotional. You keep factual. And I mean, I'm not too sure geographically exactly where this is, but from the areas that you talked about, have you thought of involving your local Sierra Club, your local Audubon chapter? Because I have done this through the Audubon chapter locally, because habitat for birds and things is being destroyed, and that is part of the environmental impact. So I would really try and, I mean, I think you probably left it a little late, but link with those kind of people. They may well be also protesting without your knowledge. So, and really don't be frightened. Part of it is bulk, not just content. You know, if 100 people send in comment instead of 3 people, it's going to kind of make them think a little bit harder, even if all those comments are fairly rubbishy. It's numbers. So anyway, that's what I was going to say about that. The other thing I was going to say, though, is we are not a very nice species. I don't think anybody will dispute that. We are a species that has been warlike right through history, prehistory, forever and ever and ever. And when you actually get to the root of it, most of our problems have been over scarce resources. And I think that we really need to realize what state the world is in now, with millions and millions of refugees all around the world because of global warming, because of scarce resources, and take that into account. I mean, to me, that is really what it's all about at root. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you, Rose. Rick.
Yeah, thank you for having this discussion, because I think Dave brings up an important point about a lot of times it's not beneficial and not honest to question why the way an oppressed people fight their oppression. And sometimes desperation is involved. And if there's desperation involved, That's our problem for not being involved. Okay. But I also think that we are in a different position to be able to be effective, even using nonviolent means to make a change. The problem is we are stuck in the ideas that we had that worked in previous guises, but doesn't work now, right? First off, we have to remember that this is an issue that has been around a lot longer than us. I gave a reflection. I mentioned the Roman biographer Plutarch, who wrote, "The poor go to war to fight and die for the delights, riches, and superfluities of others."
Mm.
It's been around that long. So I think there were ways to fight that were effective then. We need to do it now. We have a lot of people, specifically young people and other people that have grown up in the information era, that aren't using the tools that we have. And we can think of them in the same ways that Mario Savio thought about it in the 60s, about putting our bodies on the gears of the machine. The way that we can do that's a little bit differently, is take a look at the corporations that are benefiting from contracts that will happen with this facility, and do things like tie up their email addresses, tie up their phone lines, tie up you know, progress that they are making in this type of thing. That is our way of putting, that can be one way of putting our bodies on the gears of the machine. So I think that's one thing that's really good to look at, and I know that's one thing that the folks at World Beyond War and Phil and other people out there are doing. So I just wanted to bring that up, that we need to be as creative as the entities that want to stop us from the entities that are trying to stop us from being creative are extremely creative in getting us to think about taking away our own power. We have to fight against that.
Rick, I just can't resist. This horror is called a Naval Innovation Center.
Yeah.
You're calling for peace innovation. We need, it's
Yeah.
very nice. Good
Yeah.
work.
Rick, thank you for those observations. I really appreciate what you said. And we have the next person on my list is Maggie Hutchison. Maggie?
I just wonder why the comprehensive list that they gave was included in that letter. Of all the things that didn't need to be investigated, they were all things that were obviously things that should be investigated. Were they goading the community to respond? Were they trying to get people to reject the idea?
Well, I do have an answer. It has to do with the local environment. Monterey is home to the Defense Language Institute, where translators and diplomats are trained, and the military sends officers there to be trained. One of the translators at Abu Ghraib killed herself because she'd been trained to translate Arabic, and she loved the culture, and she went to Abu Ghraib and translated for torture. We had a memorial for her. It's called Non-Combat Weapons Discharge. These are the things we have in Monterey. We have the Naval Postgraduate School, which is sponsoring this horror, which was the first higher education to offer a degree in fighting terrorism after 9/11. We have a lot of highly educated, classy, symphony donating, Earth Day participating officers. They're war Democrats. Leon Panetta is from Monterey, father of the drones. No more pilots shot down. Obama and Panetta. These officers are Obama war Democrats. They will do electric cars, they will do bicycles, they will do recycling, but you cannot mention war. Within the sustainable local movement, we have peace people that are starting to bring it up. This issue will bring it to a head. But you each have the military is so deeply embedded in our society, it's not even questioned. Our local high schools just gave out awards to essayists who explained why NATO is good. It's very deep. We have a lot of work, but step by step. But I want to say something. I came here today determined not to ask you anything, because everywhere I go, I'm asked to give money, I'm asked to support, I'm asked to do work. I said, I'm just going to come and offer resources, and I am completely blown away. What was meant to be a talk, you convened your board and you took an action, and you're going to, as soon as we get the petition up, we'll send it. It's just been amazing. It's been amazing. You surprised me. I'm honored and touched.
Thank you. Thanks, McGregor. A quick question. Do you have the name of the woman who took her own life because she had been, I assume, overwhelmed by guilt? Was it someone in your area, in your region?
No, it was not a local person. I would have to go back and find her name. There were articles about her. In 2003, we did a protest against torture on the front lawn of the Defense Language Institute, because that's what military translators do. They end up in torture rooms or in occupations translating. And they often go into it because they're young people who love the language. And it's a tragic thing. We had it. It was a very powerful one. Our keynote speaker was a man named Phil Butler, a veteran for peace, who was in the Hanoi Hilton for 8 years. And he was tortured. And he spoke out against torture and said this. He said, people tell me it's always been done in war. He says, but it's not the same when it's endorsed. Mm-hmm. He said, when we were being tortured, we said our country would never approve this, even if you know it was done illegitimately. He says, for our country to endorse torture is a betrayal of his having endured it, that this is a betrayal. And he lost all his privileges. I mean, look him up in Wikipedia. Phil Butler, he gave up everything to speak out against torture. He'd been like an honored speaker. Can you imagine? People speaking up makes a difference. What you're doing makes a difference. When I heard all of the work the people in this meeting are doing, you are making a big difference.
Thank you, McGregor. I have Carol Francis with hand raised. Hello.
Yeah. Speaking up for people who speak out for Julian Assange. Going back to the question of Gaza and whether nations occupying other nations have the quote right of self-defense, like, end quote, like if somebody bursts into your house with guns and somebody in your family shoots one of them, do they have a right to kill all of you in self-defense? Anyway, another aspect of that, though, is if a people are practicing nonviolence and it's ignored, then we have even more reason to not condemn them. And I've been at Palestinian nonviolent actions that were modeled after. In fact, the training that we got in nonviolence was like right out of Jim Lawson's activities and training. in Ramallah by Palestinians. The difference between that and nonviolence in the South with Martin Luther King is that then the media covered the police dogs and the police beating up on peaceful protests. And people in the United States saw it on television and responded in horror. When the same things happened in Palestine, the media refused to deal with it. Peace organizations that found out about it refused to protest. And so when you do nonviolent actions constantly, over and over, the Academy Award nominated documentary Five Broken Cameras is about nonviolence in Palestine every week. That just goes ignored. And just like I keep repeating, JFK saying, those who make nonviolent revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.
Yes.
Thanks, Carol Francis. I have another question for McGregor. Just information. What is the name of the language center that is run by the U.S. military?
It's called the DLI, Defense Language Institute. And around here, we can tell who the enemy of the week is by what language is being taught. In the 70s and 80s, Russian was taught and all kinds of other related languages. In the 90s, Glasnost meant massive unemployment for Russian instructors, and you could buy used Russian books, textbooks by the ton. You see, our local, it follows it, and all of a sudden, Farsi and Arabic and Pushtun were all being taught. You can hear them practicing in the coffee shops because it's very intense language training, all day. So the languages that are being taught by the military at the beautiful Defense Language Institute in beautiful Monterey, so that they can go out and translate for torturers and occupying forces all over the world. Lovely young people. We need to stop this.
Thank you. So the location of the place and the coffee shops where you hear people practicing their language is Monterey.
Monterey, we have a lot of military here. We have the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, although objectively civilian. It does things like train translators for the UN. There's a lot of, what do you call it, bureaucratic. They have a whole department on non-proliferation. Non-proliferation is not disarmament. Non-proliferation means we get the bombs and others don't. And so there's a lot of slick, highly educated hypocrisy that isn't military heavily around our area. So our peace movement is not with the environmental movement, because a lot of the young middle-class professionals in our beautiful town I live in Salinas, are military. They work for the military. Or one step away, their husband does, or their son does, or their dad does, or their cousin does. It affects the environment, but that's what we need to do. We need to take it all on. Thank you.
And thank you. And is the Middlebury Institute affiliated with with Middlebury College in Vermont? Do you know?
Yes, it is. It's a partner.
Good. What a shame.
And it's the James Smart non-proliferation. And even though they teach a lot of international business, it's kind of like we have a very international community in Monterey, but it's very committed to the system. So we have a lot to do. It'll be very interesting. But their kids like turtles.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you here today.
Dave?
And I see a hand raised, Steve Rohde.
Well, just as we're wrapping up, to button this down, Dolores and McGregor, do you have an organization based in Monterey? Is it your affiliate? Is it another group that could be the initial objector on these comments?
Yes, the Monterey Peace and Justice Center.
Good.
I figured
Perfect name, perfect group. I think I want to get your mind working. Online comments could include links to any World Beyond War statements and materials about war is bad for the environment. So you may only be able to draft a skeletal set of objections listing what has been overlooked in the report, what's faulty. I know you won't be able to dig into hundreds of pages, but you can piggyback links back to World Against War, World Beyond War, to support your set of comments. And again, over the weekend with Rick and I, you already have permission. We'd like to see what your comments are briefly, but you can add Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace as second to your group.
I just got a text from Greta from World Beyond War. The petition, other people are working on various language, but the petition is being drafted. It should go up in a couple hours. I'll send the link to you. It'll be on, go to the World Beyond War website. I want you guys to go anyway and check out all our lovely courses and book clubs and look, it will be there soon. Watch that space.
But remember, that kind of public petition is one thing. You've got to officially lodge your objections to the EIR. We're about to wrap up, which Dave will moderate, but I want to personally thank McGregor and Dolores. You are now card-carrying members of ICUJP, and we welcome you back for these Friday forums. We've put on 1,000 webinars in the 22 years we've been in existence, and this is a highlight of those webinars, so thank you both.
I'm looking forward to coming back. I'm an early riser, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on another Friday morning.
And we'd love to hear from you again, and Dolores as well, to be participants in other discussions that we might have, because I believe that your input would be very valuable and welcome to all of us.